All right, welcome everybody to Satsang, August 6th, 2026. So this week should be you guys are going to be used to hearing this. I did it, and it's almost a continuation or a revisit of last week's, only from just a little bit of a different angle. So I this week we're going to um, this week we're going to basically use some of the later stuff from Nisargadatta. I don't know if you guys know, I Am That was printed in um, the early to mid late 70s. It was that period of time, not late 70s, but mid 70s. Then later, a woman named Dunne, who you might have all heard about, did three books more. And they're the very same thing that I Am That is. They're just satsangs that Maharaj did. But at that point in time, he really was doing some kind of different things. So and you'll hear it when we talk about it. So what we're doing today is December 15th of 1980. They listed it. They don't list them in numbers anymore. They list them in dates. So it's December 15th, December 22nd, and December 25th of 1980. And remember, he passed in 1981. So he's getting ready here. He's in his last probably 6 months at that particular point in time. So December 18th, 1980, and it starts off, this consciousness is like a screen, and I am the screen. That's what the questioner pronounces to Maharaj. And, we always talk about how the responses to a lot of things are very in the moment. So the response may not be what you think it is, because we use that all the time. The consciousness is a screen, and what I am is that screen. Consciousness fills the screen, right? And covers the absolute awareness. I would always say that absolute awareness is the screen and consciousness is what covers it. That's just different terminology. But this particular questioner is pronouncing something that we might use all the time. And Maharaj immediately comes back and he says, understand what I say without concepts. Adding new concepts. Now go to zero concepts. That's the first thing he says. So what he perceives immediately when this questioner pronounces that he's the screen, is that what's happened is he's created a concept, right? It's not that he's using this as a pointer, but he's trying to grab onto something, right? He says there are many spiritual seekers whose aim is to acquire sufficient merit to reach a certain place, such as heaven. He says, I have no aims except to find out. I was not aware of my awareness, and suddenly I became conscious that I am. Where and how did this consciousness arise in me? Now notice, everything the Sargadatta does is a going back to what actually exists right here and now, as opposed to pronouncing the what would it be, the result. I am the screen. That's not what he's after here. He's saying what's actually happening. No concepts. He said that was my inquiry, going back to the state when the presence of phenomena was not there. What's the state of who I am before consciousness ever arose? That is original knowledge of the original self. So I went back tracing the original self, and I reached a stage where I wanted to know what my state was before this consciousness ever arose. That is the destination that I have reached. Right? So nothing about screens and consciousness and all of that, simply what it is doing. Now, what we're going to think about this for a minute. What we're going to talk about today. Last week we talked about missing the line, right? Where we have a pointer, it sends us in a direction, but we grab onto that pointer and we make it something we carry with us forever. So we're adding something. Consciousness is change. It's always about adding something, creating something, building something, constructing something, right? So what he's talking about now is going back to before there were words, before there was consciousness. What does it look like? So he's looking for simplicity, no concepts. That's what he's after. And the reason that I'm hammering and harboring on it is that it's just so unlike anything that we're conditioned to do. We're always conditioned to build. Movement means build. Movement means create. That's what we do within consciousness, right? He said, Brahman, Ishvara, God, all of these names are given to consciousness when it is consciousness of itself, when it's conscious of itself. If you will have properly understood this knowledge, what will be your position at the so-called moment of death? It will be watching what is happening. So when we're talking about watching, you can see that actually sits back in the before, right? That's it. That's the before. The watching is an activity of dissolution. And that's why we go to watching. Have you ever noticed that when watching occurs, you can feel the distance start to arise, right? We call it distance. It feels like distance, right? So that is a part of this movement. So everything is going back down the track, right? Zero concepts. That's what we're talking about. The direction from activity to non-activity. This consciousness gradually loses everything, and ultimately consciousness is no longer conscious of itself. Right? So think of what duality is. Duality is simply a device in which things arise, and there is a watching of those things arise. So duality, consciousness is the state of basically revealing itself to itself. But in the natural state of itself, there is no duality and there is no revealing. That's all that Maharaj is pointing out. When you go back far enough, it's no longer there. He says, this state cannot be described. He calls it Para Brahman, the supreme, absolute. He says, but that is only a name for communication purposes. So you can see, even when you start to call this place something, this state something, you're using concepts. And what he's trying to do is have you understand that those concepts are simply things that are for communication purposes only. This line inquiry started when I noticed from the moment that one wakes up to one falls asleep, one is very busy doing something or other. What is it that compels us to do these things? Because of what does this go on? Then I came to the conclusion that it is my beingness, the fact that I am conscious of existing, which is working throughout the day. That was how my inquiry started. Consciousness is always in action. He started to notice that during the waking hours watching. It's always happening out there. In the body, the indwelling principle is consciousness. Abiding in the consciousness, it became all manifestation. Now transcendence of the consciousness has also occurred. With the appearance of consciousness, the absolute knows it is, I am, this is the experience. There are other experiences now in this time factor. But experiences, he's talking about himself now, but experiences are gradually dropping off, including this primary experience. I am. It is only the consciousness that is going to disappear. The absolute is always there. What a fall. The perfect state caught up in all these experiences and trying to derive certain benefits out of these experiences, right? The questioner, is it spontaneous? And here he finishes, yes. Whatever experiences were happening in this field of knowingness, the ultimate principle got caught up in that. It accepted some experience as itself. Accepting experiences as the truth, it gets more and more involved. So this is why the tracking back is what is happening, why he's saying zero concepts. The pronouncement of what one is or where one is. Think about what we do a lot of times. We pronounce, right? But in that pronouncement, we're basically creating something. We're pronouncing what we are. So think about what we do more than anything else that we do in life. We basically tell people who we are. We describe to people who we are. I always tell that uh, story about how I like to eavesdrop, right? So walk into a restaurant and listen to the conversations. And what you're going to hear is a lot of people telling other people who they are, right? So you see a husband and wife 50 years together, they're basically resetting the who they are. They've been doing that for 50 years. So this is an incredible habit to pronounce who I am. So we get into a spiritual mode and all of a sudden we become the screen, right? We say, oh, that's what I am now. I'm the screen. Right? Now he's going to go on and talk about that. He calls it the uniform that you put on, the personality, the who you are, that you're always describing the uniform, right? So that's what we're up to today. Is the last week we were talking about how you pass the pointer. Well, now we're talking about going the opposite direction. What's before the pointer? But the same thing, the same thing. So when you are actually in the search, the uh, the search itself ends up being um, created in the same way that everything else is created in your life. Just be aware that that's going to be the natural predisposition. I'm going to go do it the same way I've done everything else in life. That's the conditioning that you carry. What do you do with that? You watch. There's nothing to do with that, just to recognize that that's what's going on and that it's in the watching, right? That's all. But this is telling you why that happens, why we fall off the horse so often, so to speak. Right? All right, any comment at this point? Okay. So this was December. So that was December what, 18th, I think it was. Didn't I say? Yeah, December 18th. So this is 4 days later. There's 3 days that we're going to work with today. He says, just now I was lying down in the waking state, but with no perceiving or receiving any words, something like a prior to words state. This is Maharaj speaking. Now the last traces of personality or individuality have left me. Last year I used to talk to people with a certain affection, but that's not available now. My dwelling place in a grosser world is gone now. Presently it is in the subtler sphere, as in space. So think about that for a minute. Most people, when they think of awakening, they think of the folks that speak from the awakened space, you know. It's always, oh, that it's an arrival of a place that doesn't change. And that's true from a perceptive standpoint. Awareness, the seeing never changes, right? But the what is seen always does. And you are part of what is seen. You're a body mind that is in a constant state of flux. So now Maharaj is getting ready to pass, and he notices, I used to talk to people with a certain affection. That's not there anymore. It shifted. Nothing, nothing he did, right? It just simply shifted. And now he just notices that he's much more in a previous to word state. That's where he is now, is he's moving towards death. For some reason that happened to him. He says the effect of these talks is that you will stabilize in the very source from which words sprout. Abiding in the dynamic manifest consciousness is abiding in the words of the guru. The meaning of the mantra I've given you is that you are the manifest dynamic principle, not the body. When you abide in that, you become that. You become consciousness, changeability. People think they're coming here of their own volition, but it is the consciousness which is bringing them here because the consciousness wants this knowledge. Right? What has you here is the consciousness itself. It's simply animating the body mind to do that. Then we personalize it and we say, I am seeking. All right, that becomes the new uniform. He says, my talks are addressed to consciousness. And this is really something you've seen in his later life. He talks a lot about consciousness, speaking to consciousness, which is always what's going on. It's just we personalize it as though there's some I or something there doing that. He says, my talks are addressed to the consciousness. You have identified with the body, but you are not the body. It is knowledge which must understand its own nature and merge with the knowledge which is its source. People come here and ask for blessings. They don't understand that the knowledge that one is not the body, but the consciousness within is the blessing. So they come asking for a blessing and they don't recognize what they are is already the blessing. So that's going to come over and over again. Think about it. When you want to get a blessing, that's an activity of consciousness, adding, possession, addition, construction. When you recognize that you already are that, right? The blessing you are asking for is what you are. It's already there. Now the question is, oh, how can that be revealed? How can we reveal what's already there? That's the biggest piece of what's going on here, right? So now we're going to talk about the uniform piece. This is December 25th, Christmas, 1980. Gosh, I'm trying to think. I was a tender 27 years old or something then. He says, when we are busy with our worldly jobs, what should we keep in mind? Now, that's the questioner. Now, Maharaj, I've always been fascinated. When you ask Maharaj a question and you categorize it, he almost always ignores that because busy with our worldly jobs to him, I believe, is simply living in consciousness. So he has a tendency to onboard. It looks like he's answering the question, but if you read the answer, he's talking about every moment of living. He says, because the I am principle is there, it is moving all over. To recognize it, you put various uniforms on in order to give it an identity. But that principle is already there. And because that principle, you are engaging in various activities. Unless you wear the uniform, the body, you will not be able to conduct any activities. The body's required to participate in all this. So we recognize that the body's necessary. This knowledge is meant for the Ishvara principle, which is presently caught up in the illusion that it is the body mind, which is that absolute awareness. It has done that. You have accepted the identity of the uniform, and that identity becomes your ego. So when we're busy with our worldly jobs, what we should keep in mind, the same thing at any other time, whatever the uniform that's required to do whatever is being done, that's your ego. That's what you become. So I was a business guy, you know, Joseph is a wise man. I mean, we could pick different things. That's what we do. Right. I would submit that the wise man's more dangerous than the business guy, but just to note that. He says, Ishvara is the manifest principle by which all activities are carried on. It has no form. The forms are given because of the five elemental play. Now that principle gets completely lost in the uniform and is recognized by the uniform only. You have the fear of death because you fear losing your identity, the body, the uniform. Since the uniform is available to you, by all means use it, but understand you are not the uniform. What does one do when the uniform gets troublesome? You know where he's going to go. Recede into your own self. Start with the I am. Be one with your true self. This I amness enjoys various experiences. It becomes a beggar, a king. Is this body eternal? The body has been changing all during your life. Which identity is you? So I'm going to say something because Joseph and I have talked about this a lot, but Joseph loves the activity of each individual. He loves to look at it. He loves to figure it out. He loves to think about it. He loves that, right? So think about that. This is what Maharaj says. This I amness enjoys various experiences. So that enjoyment and that recognition that we're all individuals and we're all enjoying it, we're all squeezing life like a lemon, the Osho version, right? Yeah, that's going on. It doesn't mean that's who you are, but that is going on. So What else would you expect Joseph to say? Joseph happens to be somebody. I'm like that with food trucks, right? I mean, there are certain things that happen in existence that the I amness just simply enjoys, and the body mind that you are is built for whatever those particular ones are. So now it's remembering that that's not who you are, versus a lifetime likely where you thought that was who you were, right? So that's the difference we're playing with here. He says, is this body eternal? The body has been changing all during your life. Which identity is you? Question mark. Questioner, I identify myself with the body. I know that. Who? Questioner, I do. Yeah. He says, give me a photograph of the meaning of the word I. You can't. You can't. Think about it. I always love it that humans walk around with such incredible faith and intensity and sureness of who they are. But if you ask them what an I is, they couldn't describe it if they've tried. Humanity's been doing that and will do it for the rest of its, humanity's existence. That's what's going to happen. But there's something about the ego that demands that you're sure of what I am, right? That surety matters. And that's where it comes. But the I can live without being sure of what it is. We know that, right? We just assume we need to be sure. He said that the principle has no form or shape. My firm conclusion is that whatever is done through the uniform is perishable, is not going to remain. Which uniform has any permanency? Once you know you are not the form or the name of that uniform, it's all over. And I love this example. Suppose you have hoarded some 1,000 rupee notes and suddenly the government order comes and they are all invalidated. Once you discard the I amness uniform, what remains is the para Brahman. That which is eternally current is the para Brahman. So we go around spending other currencies, and the spiritual journey is finding out that the currencies we've been spending, that awareness has come in and said, yeah, that's not a currency. They've suspended that currency. All that is the currency of the uniform. But the currency of forever and eternalness is awareness itself. Will Maharaj help me discard the uniform? What do you think he's going to say? What's the need? It's not eternal. It never was. It'll be discarded on its own. Nobody needs to help that happen. He said, the questioner, we have not discarded ours. That's the problem. Now tell me, when the knowingness was not there, what experiences did you have? The little touch of I amness, and you felt the existence of yourself in the world. How to give up this knowingness? What is the need? If you accept the uniform as yourself, then the question of giving it up will be there. Give up your identity with the body. Try to know yourself. Don't don't worry. Don't worry about losing the identity. That happens all by itself once it's discovered that that's not who you are. And Maharaj calls that apperception, right? Which is perceiving from the absolute. That's what he would refer to that as. Interesting. What he does with these 3 days, right? He hones in very specifically on that. All right. Any input? Any questions? Comments at this point?
It's really beautiful. That's really all I have to say.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just recognize that I think sometimes we don't have a lot of comments in here because last time and this time, for instance, there's a real similarity what we were talking about. There's a little bit of a different angle. One was saying, hey, when you miss the line, here's what happens. This one is saying, wait, when you go backwards to before the words, right? Remember, we did multiplied by zero. Now we're talking about going to zero concepts, right? These all intertwine with each other. So a lot of times this is just simply the hammer blow of just a little bit of a different version right? It's still a key on the piano. Go ahead, Joseph.
Yeah, no, I'm impressed by his dedication, and and then because he speaks, and he certainly sounds like he knows a lot, but what flows through him is not because he studied stuff, but it became available to him,
Yeah.
which is that's pretty mind blowing actually.
Well, it is, and it's really funny, I think, because I think there's a certain recognition. My guess is that you've had this one too, Joseph, but if you remember when we first got involved with spirituality, we were running around reading this book, reading this guy, right? Compiling all the things and all the words and all the terms and all of that, you know. And I have to say, for me anyway, I'm not the most intelligent guy on earth, but I did a pretty good job of holding it together. And so it's still in there, right? It doesn't get pieces of it get used now and then, but that big body of stuff that I thought was so important, it's just it's just out there somewhere. You know, it's and I kind of get the feeling that with the Nisargadatta, that's where he was hanging. He'd gone through that period. He'd done that. He'd assembled all of that at some point in time.
Oh, uh-huh.
You know, but and when he needs it, it pops up. He'll use the words, right? But then he goes back to simplicity. He always does.
So you think he actually went through a period of study and reading all this stuff as well? Uh huh. Okay.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, when he uses the different names, you know, the different,
Yes.
you know, para Brahma and all of that, that's
Right.
just a name, right?
Right.
So hold on, try to get my dogs to quit barking. That's always a challenge for satsang.
Right.
Did you have something to say, Jill?
Yeah. So there's no experience without the uniform, without the body.
Duality
Correct?
is the only place that experience arises because it's the revealing of what is to itself,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So when I always call it a device. In other words, time and space
Okay.
were created. You know, space is the extension, right? Time is duration. So time and space create this platform in terms of where things can happen. And then perception is there, and there's always this duality, which is one thing watching another thing, right? But but prior to that, right, all you have is awareness, but unaware of itself. There is no duality.
Okay. Thank you.
Man. All right, so now you're gonna hear a little bit more because when I wrote this week's, I actually wove some of what I've already said into this. So you're gonna hear it again. I'm sure you'll all love it. He says, you know, a questioner came to Nisargadatta and offered what must have been felt like a breakthrough. This consciousness is like a screen, and I am that screen. It sounds right. It has the flavor of understanding. It uses the correct vocabulary. It arrives at the conclusion that seems to point in the right direction. Maharaj's response was immediate without ceremony. Understand what I say without concepts. You are adding new concepts. And then the instruction that gives this piece its title, now go to zero concepts. The questioner had done exactly what we all do. He had taken a living pointer, the distinction between consciousness and that which witnesses it, converted it into a position, a thing to be, a concept to hold. In reaching for the screen, he missed what the screen was pointing at. And Maharaj, with characteristic precision, did not explain this at length. He simply cut the thread, named the direction zero. The journey is always yours, right? So to speak, right? The journey has to be taken. That's why a lot of times there's just a pointer and it feels like you got dumped off somewhere before the pointer happened. That's because that's because the moving to that place is going to happen, right?
Right. But the thing is, when he says now go to zero, you can't go to zero.
But he's pointing at it. Well, he
Right.
is now go to zero, right?
Right.
But and of course, you heard him talk about how consciousness is speaking to consciousness, or knowledge is finding
Yes.
itself. So that's where he's after. So go to zero.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it.
Because you and I can't go there. You're absolutely right.
Right. You can't do it, but right. Got it.
That's all he's saying.
Right.
Right.
Thanks.
I know it's kind of funny when you think about it that way because life, so instead of the idea that every time somebody speaks, It's some piece of new knowledge, because that's what we're all about. Hey, man, I'm going to discover something new. Isn't this cool? I came to this place where I was like, I think consciousness is just a series of reminders, right? To consciousness itself.
Mm.
Like go to zero. Yeah, come on, that's where you're headed. Just let me remind you.
Yeah, but you have to give, at least me, I have to give up the idea that I have to do something.
That's correct. That's correct.
So what he keeps
But
pointing to, all you have to do is keep watching, and if it falls away, it falls away. But
yeah,
just keep watching.
and then think about in the watching includes the doing that you think you're doing,
Hmm.
right? And so the actual reality becomes the obvious that, oh, wait a minute, that Joseph that thought he was doing something, well, that's happening anyway,
Yeah,
right? And that replaces this sense that I am doing what I'm doing.
right.
Just the watching does that. Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah. So he says to understand why this is so hard, it helps to look at how we arrived here, meaning not just this room, but the condition of being a grown human being with a full operational conceptual apparatus. A child arrives in the world at zero concepts. It's not a metaphor. The infant has no framework for separation, no story about who she is, no investment in a particular version of events. Consciousness in its arising is the beginning essence of every new human being, complete, undivided, requiring nothing, and then the world gets to work. Those surrounding the child have their own fully developed conceptual structures, and they begin with the best of intentions to transfer those structures. Family, society, religion, education, all of them add their weight. The underlying message, carried not in the words but in the entire architecture of how adults live, is this: existence is a building project. You accumulate, you construct, you add. The self is something that grows through acquisition. The measure of life is what it has produced and held on to. I remember once Osho said, well, there's no such thing as what people say, you're going to throw away our relationship. And Osho would say, well, there's no relationship. All there is what's happening now. And either it's going to continue or it's going to end. Now I just ruined an entire field of endeavor, didn't we? He says, by adulthood, this conditioning is so thorough that it operates beneath awareness. We do not decide to treat every incoming experience as material for the construction project. We simply do it. And when a spiritual teaching arrives, even when explicitly pointing towards dissolution, towards the undoing of the self, the construction machinery receives it and begins building with it. Just recognize that's how we're built. That's how we operate. The pointer towards elimination becomes another acquisition. The teaching about no self becomes the self's most new, interesting possession. This is what Maharaj saw in the Westerners. I am the screen. Not malice or stupidity, just the construction program running its code on material that was never meant to be used that way. Ramesh Balsekar told a story about children at the seaside that locates zero concepts with perfect clarity. Take a child to the beach, give her a bucket and a spade, watch the amount of time and energy that goes into the building of a sandcastle, especially if several children work together, each contributing, the whole structure growing with remarkable seriousness and commitment. Then tell them it's time to go home. Without a moment's hesitation, they kick it down. The adult asks why they built it and then demolished it. The child will look at you with honest bewilderment. I like to build the sandcastle. I like to destroy it. The child genuinely cannot understand what the adult finds confusing. There's no investment, no concept of something valuable being lost, no grief at the undoing. Building and destroying are just simply two phases of the same activity, equally enjoyed, equally available. The adult who watches this and cannot join in has crossed a line. Somewhere in the years of conditioning, the destruction of what was built became unacceptable. Not because the sandcastle had intrinsic value, because the building had become identified with the self. Right. So we're all afraid of death. So what we do is we build and construct something that we hope will withstand death. To knock it down would diminish something that now carries identity. The adult is not more sophisticated than the child. The adult is more thoroughly trapped. This is what zero concepts looks like from the outside. From the inside, it looks like nothing in particular, because at zero concepts, there's no one to take a position on what it looks like. Ramesh also told a story about a child named Philippe, 5 or 6 years old, who said to his housekeeper one day, we're all dreaming and we'll all wake up when we are dead. Absolutely accurate. The mother, when she heard this, grew worried and later asked Philip where he had learned it. The way he looked at her with such compassion for the stupidity of the question before answering. God told me that. That's what a child would say. God told me that. Philippe had not studied Advaita. He had not accumulated any spiritual merit or spent years in meditation. He is reporting what was simply there prior to the overlay of concepts that would eventually convince him otherwise. The knowledge that consciousness is a dream from which awareness eventually wakes. This is not esoteric wisdom available only after decades of seeing. It's the natural state of awareness before the building project begins. Children know it. Adults spend years trying to remember it. In the December 22nd talk from Consciousness and the Absolute, Maharaj said something that connects all of this with the experience of sitting in this room. People think they are coming here of their own volition, but it is the consciousness which is bringing them here because consciousness wants this knowledge. And that makes you feel really important, does it? That this matters. The movement towards dissolution, towards zero concepts, is not something the personal self initiates or controls. It is consciousness itself, restless in its identification, dimly aware that something is wrong with the building project, that pulls the seeker towards the teaching. You did not decide to be here in the way you decided what to have for breakfast. Something larger made this particular movement happen. The seeker who takes credit for the seeking, once again, has added a new concept where Maharaj was pointing at the absence of them. He continued, my talks are addressed to the consciousness. You have identified with the body, but you are not the body. It is knowledge which must understand its own nature and merge with the knowledge which is its source. Knowledge understanding its own nature, not self-acquiring knowledge about the nature of reality, the knowing itself turning back toward what it arises from. So I don't know if you see the simplicity of this, right? But the simplicity is this moving back towards what it's from. Right? This is the direction of zero concepts, not a place the ego can navigate toward, right? That's what Joseph just said. We can't go there. Correct. But a movement that happens when the ego's building program is clearly seen through to stop being mistaken for the journey itself. On December 25th, Maharaj offered a metaphor that cuts to the bone. The I am principle, he said, is like an animating presence that puts on a uniform in order to conduct activities in the world. The body is the uniform. It is necessary. Without the uniform, you cannot act in the manifest world. But it is not, you can act in the manifest world, but it's not you. The problem is that the principle gets completely lost in the uniform and is eventually recognized by the uniform alone. Identity has collapsed into its costume. The fear of death is, at root, simply the fear of losing the uniform. Then the question that stops the whole construction project in its tracks. Give me a photograph of the meaning of I. What a great sentence, huh? You cannot. The principle has no name, no form, no shape, right? A photograph can only capture what has an extension in space, an object, a body, a face. The I that is being asked has none of these. It is prior to the uniform. It is prior to consciousness. It was what was there before the screen was there to be mistaken for. This is zero concepts approach from the December 25th angle. Not the elimination of thought as a practice, but the recognition that the thing you are trying to photograph does not exist as an object. So whatever you're constructing, right? The construction of the ego, there's no possibility of it ever grabbing that. Right? Can't the camera cannot find it. Concepts cannot build it. The building program cannot build toward it because it is already what is present before the first brick is laid. Dissolution, revealing. And then Maharaj offered the image of a 1,000 rupee note. Suppose you've hoarded a stack of them. After years of careful accumulation, and then the government order comes, and suddenly all of these are invalidated, worthless overnight, not destroyed, not sudden, not stolen, just suddenly and completely beside the point. It must be, if you existed beyond death, that would be your moment. You go, holy shit, it was all counterfeit. Right? The awareness came in and said, that's not the currency. What remains after the invalidation is para Brahman, the absolute that never was the uniform, never the currency, never the accumulated concept about what you are. It is eternally current, as he put it, precisely because it was never in circulation. The club of eccentric young men had a rule. On Tuesday evenings, any member who asked a question he could not answer himself was fined 10 rupees. One evening, Nasruddin asked, why doesn't a ground squirrel leave any dirt around the top of his hole when he digs it? Good question. After some deliberation, he was called upon to answer his own question. That's easy, he said. The squirrel starts at the bottom and then digs up. All very nice, a member replied, but how does it get to the bottom? Ah, that's your question, replied Nasruddin. Right? The intellectual at its most agile can produce an answer for almost anything, and then leave the foundational question unanswered, attributed to somebody else, exempt from scrutiny. Concepts generating concepts, each one pointing to the next. The whole structure impressively coherent and utterly unable to locate where the squirrel started. Right? Think about it. You never really know where you are, right? The only reason you think you know where you are is because somebody named a place to begin with, and we measure from that place to wherever the hell we are right now. But nobody knew where the first place was, and nobody knows where the place is right now. It's just somewhere. There is no location. Doesn't exist, except for in the mind. He says, zero concepts is not a better answer to the question about the squirrel. It is the recognition that the question itself was the wrong move, that the entire Tuesday evening club with its fines and its rules and its clever members is a construction project in miniature. That's all it is. So now it's your turn. Watch and see how the compelling thrust of your conditioning has you pretending you are going to zero concepts. It is subtle. The pointer towards elimination gets picked up by the building program and carried forward as the newest addition to the collection. Joseph and I were talking about when we were young and we were accumulating it all, right? That's what we were doing. You find yourself with a concept about zero concepts, a position on the absence of position, and a self who is working on the no self. There is nothing to do with this observation except what Maharaj did with the questioner's screen. See it, name it, point directly at the direction it was almost concealing. Now go to zero concepts, not as a new instruction to follow, not as a practice to master or a state to achieve, simply as a recognition available in this very moment that what you actually are does not require a uniform, was never the screen, and cannot be photographed. The sandcastle was lovely. Kick it down. All right. That's today. Welcome, Brad. I'm sorry I saw some messages coming, but I was already talking. You're muted. You're muted. Now you're not. Oh, yeah.
The funny part was this. For months, whenever I would come in there, the link would be right there at the
Yeah.
top of the group conversation, and I never missed it. This time, I couldn't find it anywhere. So
Yeah.
did you bury it somewhere?
I don't know. I'll have to. We'll have to address that.
Okay. Well, at least Michael came to my rescue and gave me a link, and I'm sure
Oh,
if I
that's
get
awesome.
I could always use his message again if I get desperate.
Yeah.
So thanks, Michael.
No, Mike does a good job of that. My guess is, having heard that, we'll figure out a way to make sure it's
Yeah, it was there all the time until today.
now you do know that it's the same every time.
Oh yeah, but I never bothered to save it anywhere.
I'm just telling you that, so in case you ever, were you to stick it somewhere on your computer, like I've got a Word document on my computer here, and I just click on it and the link's there. So
Oh,
so that's just me, but that's because I do that with links. So
yeah. Well, I never thought to do that because it was never a problem until today.
yeah.
So
There we go.
there we go. The circle continues. Yeah.
All right. All right.
Hey,
So that's
Joseph.
it for any comments?
No, that was fun.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
So it was, what was different. What's really interesting to me was that last week when we kind of tackled it, it felt a little more intellectual, if you will. It was a really good satsang last week. I'm not saying anything about it, but when I read this piece this week, and I said, oh, let's go back into that. I wanted the part that Joseph mentioned about just the simplicity of Maharaj.
Yeah.
And a lot of what he had to say this time really reduced it to just the simplicity of being. And I thought in a much more direct way than last week's, when you talk about taking a pointer and turning it into something that's solid and not a pointer any longer, which I think it's still a great, missing the line is a wonderful pointer, right? But go to zero concepts, I think, for some reason it breathed this really on the groundness to me. And I really like that. So today for me had a lot more of that, just to stand on the ground. Oh, I'm going back. It's very simple, going back to what I was before I assumed that I knew what I was. Right.
If I can,
Go ahead, Ron.
yeah,
Ron.
even though you said that there was some similarity, I have to say, once you start speaking and you're into it, everything seems new and fresh every time.
Yeah.
It just seems like you're suspended and everything just is new and fresh, almost as if you've heard it for the first time.
Yeah.
And anyway, I just wanted to make that observation.
Oh, no, I used to, with Ramesh, it was always like that for me. He would tell a story I'd heard 100 times before. And I'd be like,
Oh, I couldn't even make a connection between last week and this week. It was just a new and fresh, and somehow I lose myself while you're talking. It's like I'm just hovering above, and everything is just like, it's just a beautiful experience. Thank you.
And that's satsang, by the way. That's the meeting in truth that dissolves the particulars who meet. Right? That's what satsang is about. You see all these wonderful faces, and then you go, oh, those are a bunch of uniforms, right? So there's a bunch of uniforms on the screen. That's all that's going on here, right? So you are me and I am you. Well, that's the obvious result, right? Is that what we are is absolute awareness. I used to always love that kind of thing, which is absolute awareness is peering through the eyes of every body mind, the same absolute awareness. Right. And I am is just the universal feeling. And when we make it an I am that, then we think that it's limited to the body mind that we're assigning it to. Who said that? Right. Who said that? And that's part of the journey.
Yeah, my experience always is that there's something going on below consciousness. I can't quite put a finger on it, but I can have a subtle feeling of it, and I can't grasp it in the mind. So I keep coming back because that something opens on a place where I can't even tell you what it is.
Yeah. No, it's true. Right. I mean, Nisargadatta has that beautiful quote. I'll dig it up maybe for next week, but it's about how the mind can't cross that chasm. Just it can't go there. Right. So in today's version, what does the mind do? It does what it does. It goes the other direction. Right. It builds. it constructs, it possesses, right? Because that's what it does.
Right.
Yes, which is fine. Like I said, that's, the thing we do is sometimes we're like, well, no, I can see it goes the other way, so I should condemn the direction that no. You just let everything do what it does. Right. The same stuff arose in Maharaja's and Ramesh's and Ramana's life that arose in everybody else's. The dramas that humans create, they arise, they splat themselves on the screen, and 3 seconds later they're gone.
Yeah. I remember something you said long ago in Oceanside, and I always liked it because it was ridiculously simple and funny. He said, the only reason all these individuals have names is so when somebody says, "Hey, Alan," Alan can go, "What?"
Yep. That's ultimately what the ego is, right?
Yeah.
It allows one body mind to respond to another. That's it.
I
That's
love
its whole
that.
purpose. Yeah.
I still like that one, man.
Yeah, no, me too. Me too. Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for coming. It was lovely having you here. I know Brad's working these days, so he can't get here as much, and we miss you.
Hey, I just changed my schedule to get off a half an hour earlier, so I was so excited to get on, and then I was thwarted.
Yeah, we'll see you. We'll see you next week because we love it when you're here for sure.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, we'll have some fun.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, you
All
guys.
right,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks,
You're
Alan.
welcome.
It was
Thanks,
great.
Alan. Have a
Jill.
great night.
Thank
all.
you.
Really
having you.
enjoying these. Thank
Okay,
you.
good.
Yeah.
See you all next week. Who knows what we're going
Okay.
to talk about? All right.
See ya.
Bye. Thank you.